Well, the 2024 GOP presidential field is expanding rapidly, with multiple Republicans jumping into the race just this week. Former New Jersey Governor Christie is now officially a presidential candidate. He filed paperwork declaring a run with the Federal Election Commission earlier today. Christie is also announcing his candidacy in New Hampshire tonight. And former Vice President Mike Pence is expected to kick off his campaign in Iowa tomorrow, while North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum is also set to announce a run. To discuss Pence's 2024 bid, CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent Robert Costa joins us now from Iowa. Hi, Bob.
Good to be with you, Nancy.
So this is something that Mike Pence has obviously been mulling for some time. What do your sources tell you were the main reasons that he ultimately did decide to get into the race?
For former Vice President Mike Pence, this presidential candidacy is not just about a personal comeback over his searing experience on January 6, 2021, and his role in certifying the 2020 election, which caused him such consternation, generated ire among former President Trump supporters. This is also about an attempted political comeback for his brand of American conservatism, that traditional Republican political playbook used by former President Ronald Reagan, Newt Gingrich in 1994, and Mike Pence during his congressional year in the House of Representatives. There's a belief inside of Pence's inner circle the Republican Party could want to move back in that direction, away from the populism and grievance of the Trump era.
What do they think, Bob, is the realistic path for Mike Pence to the nomination? Obviously, he would want to go after fans of the Trump-Pence presidency, and yet ostensibly Mr. Trump would still appear to have most of those voters locked up. And he's been making the case loudly ever since he lost that part of the reason he lost is that Mike Pence wouldn't do what he wanted Pence to do on January 6th.
If the Pence strategy comes down to anything, Nancy, it would be two of the letters on the bottom of the screen just there, IA, Iowa. His whole play is about Iowa. If you want to understand the Pence campaign, based on our reporting, you have to look back to history to understand Mike Huckabee's 2008 Republican presidential campaign, Rick Santorum's Republican presidential campaign in 2012. This was about putting a focus on Iowa and hoping to jolt in this state in the caucuses, whether it's a victory or a near victory, puts them on the map politically in the nominating contest and elevates them toward those Super Tuesday contests later in the cycle. So Pence knows he's not going to have the money. He's not going to have the same profile as Trump and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. But he also believes, I'm told, that Trump and DeSantis might end up taking each other out politically, going after each other with political warfare day in, day out. And if that occurs as a dynamic in the Republican race, Pence and others are hoping they can carve out their own space and be positioned to win over conservative voters should Trump or DeSantis ever be hobbled politically.
So what are you expecting to hear from him in Iowa tomorrow? Do you think he's going to be making an overt play for evangelical voters?
He is certainly going to be pitching evangelical voters. He's also going to talk about his Midwestern roots. He's one of the only people running for president who has Midwestern roots, so he's going to try to connect his growing up in Indiana, his boyhood in the Hoosier State, with what it's like to have life here in Iowa, the Hawkeye State. You can expect him to talk about agriculture, to talk about his faith, and he believes there's enough of a faith contingent in Iowa, in the Republican Party, to give him a block of voters that could make him very competitive, especially if he can find a way to build together that Huckabee-Santorum, Ted Cruz type coalition from previous years and add in some of the Trump voters slowly but surely.
Bob, Mike Pence is so careful about when he does and doesn't criticize the former president. Do you think that the fact that someone like Christie, who isn't careful at all about when he goes after the former president, do you think the fact that Christie's getting into the race makes it easier in some ways for Pence to seek distance from former President Donald Trump?
What you're seeing from Pence is what you're somewhat seeing from DeSantis, which is a contrast on policy. Pence has come after Trump's positions on long-term federal spending programs like Medicare and Social Security. He has argued that Trump is not conservative enough on some of these policy issues, including on abortion. Pence has a more conservative position on abortion when it comes to the details of that policy position. And so you see in Pence someone who's saying that he can come at Trump from the right. DeSantis is doing the same. And when you talk to Trump allies, they believe that's where Trump could have some vulnerability. They don't believe Republican voters are ever going to pull away from Trump on character issues or questions about his conduct. That's never proven to be an effective way to come at Trump. But coming at Trump from the right raises issues about his record. DeSantis has been going after Trump on how Trump handled the pandemic, how he interacted with Dr. Anthony Fauci. And you see Pence saying that Trump's record on the economy, on fiscal issues, is just not right-wing enough.
Robert Costa in Iowa, thank you.
Thank you.
To discuss Chris Christie's bid, CBS News political correspondent Caitlin Huey-Burns joins us now. Hi, Caitlin.
Hey, Nancy, good to be with you.
Good to see you. So walk us through Chris Christie's theory of the case. Why is he running for a second time, and why does he believe that he'll do better this time than he did in 2016?
Well, Nancy, Chris Christie is trying to carve out a space in this really crowded field that's growing by the day as the toughest Trump critic in the race. And it's a notable transition for Christie because, as you remember, in 2016, he campaigned in Iowa and especially here in New Hampshire. He came in 6th in New Hampshire, dropped out, ended up endorsing Donald Trump and being a key ally and defender of his. He helped prep him for debates in 2016 against Hillary Clinton, and then for a time he led his transition team to the White House. But he said he soured on Donald Trump after the 2020 election, in which Donald Trump made false claims about the election being stolen. And he said he got off the train at that point. So the big question now is whether there are enough voters in places like New Hampshire and elsewhere that are also willing to get off that train with Christie. He's hoping to really base his campaign here in New Hampshire, where voters in the primary are a little more independent-minded. And he's betting that there is some willingness to move on from the former president. The challenge, however, is that there are a lot of others that are competing for those voters as well. And when you look at the polling and when you talk to Republican voters, it's not necessarily that they want to hear a lot of fighting with Donald Trump. They want to hear kind of how you can turn the page, but also they seem to show support for his policies.
But that is one of the things that sets Chris Christie apart from these other Republican candidates, right? Is the fact that he isn't afraid to go directly after the former president. Does his entrance into the race mean that some of these other candidates like Mike Pence or Nikki Haley or even Tim Scott might feel more comfortable? Does it create a permission structure for them to go after former President Trump as well?
It'll be a really interesting test case of that, Nancy, for sure, or whether it could allow them to kind of move forward and let Christie be the one waging these attacks against the former president. The biggest test of all of this will be on the debate stage in August. That's going to be a challenge for Christie. You have to have a certain amount of donors, be polling in the polls at a certain threshold, and you also have to sign a loyalty pledge to support the eventual nominee. Neither Christie or Donald Trump, for that matter, have said whether they will support it. But Christie has said that the debate stage is kind of where he can make his case against the former president.
Another challenge for Christie is that he stood by the former president right up until he lost and said goodbye. And now, of course, he's a fierce critic. Caitlin Huey-Burns in New Hampshire, thanks so much.